Southeast Asian country of Brunei has introduced strict Islamic laws to make sodomy and adultery punishable by stoning to death. The move has sparked international condemnation, including from high-profile stars such as George Clooney, and the country's gay community has expressed shock and fear. Our LGBT correspondent, Ben Hunt, reports.
The Sultan of Brunei, one of the richest men in the world, ruling over a small Southeast Asian nation. And it's in this country where strict new Islamic laws are being introduced, making gay sex between men and adultery offences punishable by stoning to death.
Anyone visiting the country will attain good memories and are able to experience our peaceful and harmonious environment and the best hospitality.
Homosexuality was already illegal in Brunei, and those courts could face up to 10 years in prison. But the Sultan, who's the world's second longest running monarch, is calling for stronger Islamic teachings. He wants Brunei to become more aligned with the Islamic faith and Sharia law.
If this law is actually enforced, it will be a real setback for the human rights of the people of Brunei. And we're talking about a country which has maintained a moratorium on the death penalty since 1957. So they have not executed anyone since 1957.
Because of its oil wealth, Brunei has an investment agency which owns some of the world's top hotels, including this one, the Dorchester in London. And it's these properties which some campaigners are now calling for people to boycott. Campaigners with huge public platforms. Elton John tweeting that he's already refusing to stay at these hotels, as well as other big celebrities, asking their followers to rise up and do something now. George Clooney has said we're putting money in the pockets of those who choose to stone and whip their citizens. Brunei's LGBT community has expressed shock. Whilst there is a small hope that the new laws may not actually be widely enforced, people still say they are powerless. Before, LGBT people were living in secret. Now they're living in fear. Ben Hunt, BBC News.
Well, here with me now is Stephen Coburn from Amnesty International. I'm going to know what you're going to say, but your reaction is what, formally?
I mean, we think it's a huge backward step. The rest of the world is moving away from using the death penalty. Brunei hasn't executed anyone since 1957. So it's quite hard to understand why these very cruel punishments have been brought in at this time for issues for same-sex acts, for adultery, amputation for robbery as well. So it's a huge backward step, and we hope the government will rethink.
Well, they're not going to, are they? Hope is a wonderful thing, but I mean, is there anything that can be done internationally?
Well, I think the more that we see the spotlight in Brunei, the stronger the message will be, and the more likely it could be that, first of all, the punishments aren't used, and then hopefully in the medium term could be repealed. We've seen very strong statements from governments across the world, very strong statements from the UN. We've had activism from different celebrities as well, and of course, we want that spotlight to continue. We want there to be a feeling that Brunei regrets this action, and certainly to be a deterrent to use it, and hopefully to turn away.
You talk about the celebrity involvement, George Clooney, Elton John. I mean, do you think actually the government in Brunei will take any notice of that whatsoever?
I think the general spotlight on Brunei is quite important. I think people will find their way to make their statements, whether that be boycotts, whether that be statements to the UN, whether that be petitions. People will be shining a light on this, and I think that does help to show there's some solidarity with the LGBT community in Brunei. It does show that there's a cost to doing these sort of things. I think it's really important to know what the rest of the world is doing. The rest of the world is moving away from these type of cruel punishments, and Brunei is going in the wrong direction.
Well, I was going to ask you, Stephen, is there evidence that there are other countries who may be following a similar path?
The trend is actually going in the opposite direction. There are fewer and fewer countries using the death penalty. There are just a handful of countries left in the world who use the death penalty for gay sex. It's becoming a minority of nations are using this. There are threats, for example, from Sri Lanka to bring it back after 40 years. There are some countries that are using more, but globally the death penalty is being used less and less.
Now the risk is, and you said the hope is that this publicity may deter them from acting. It could have exactly the opposite effect, of course. And with the focus on their country, they may want to show this is what we're doing.
Well, we hope very much that's not the case. Brunei has actually a relatively positive record on the death penalty, for example. It hasn't executed anyone since 1957. We think that's a record that needs to be preserved. It should follow the reactions, not just a Western reaction. Malaysia, Brunei's biggest neighbour, is actually moving away from the death penalty. It's frozen executions. So there are lots of good examples within the region as well of that Brunei could take inspiration from.
Stephen Coburn from Amnesty International, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. You're watching Afternoon Live. Let's just show you the sky over